What sparked mass protests in Ghana? And why is Traoré at the center of it all? You won't believe how Ghanaians are standing up for Burkina Faso's Traoré. Thousands march for Traoré in Ghana. Is this the start of a Pan-African revolution? The streets of Ghana are roaring, and it's all for one man, Captain Traoré. Western powers are nervous. Ghana just showed where Africa's loyalty lies. Did Ghana just signal a shift in African politics by backing Traoré? Ghanaians flood the streets. Here's what. The mainstream media won't show you. From Accra to Ouagadougou, the people are uniting under one name, Traoré. Ghana is rising, and Captain Traoré is leading the movement from beyond the border. Watch the moment thousands of Ghanaians chant Traoré's name in the streets. Panic in Ghana. Thousands of passionate Africans have flooded the streets in support of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, sending a powerful message across West Africa and beyond. As the leader of Burkina Faso's revolution, Traoré's influence continues to grow, and Ghanaians are making it clear, Africa is ready for change. In this breaking report, we cover the massive pro-Traoré protests in Accra, the reaction from the Ghanaian government, and what this means for African unity, anti-colonial sentiment, and the rise of sovereignty-driven leadership across the continent. Stay informed on the rise of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, growing anti-Western sentiment in Africa, the latest on Ghana's civil demonstrations, the spread of the AES alliance movement, calls for economic independence and resource control, the rise of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, born March 14, 1988, in Bondagui, Burkina Faso, emerged as a transformative figure following the September 30, 2022, coup that ousted Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. At 34, he became the world's youngest head of state, now second youngest at 37, following Joseph Kabila's son in the DRC. A career soldier trained at the École Militaire de Ouagadougou, Traoré's rise was fueled by his military experience fighting jihadist insurgencies in the Sahel and his ideological alignment with Marxist and Pan-Africanist principles, inspired by Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero, Thomas Sankara. His leadership reflects a rejection of both Western influence and the status quo of Burkina Faso's political elite, resonating deeply with a youth demographic frustrated by systemic poverty and neo-colonial structures. Traoré's policies are bold and multifaceted. Upon assuming power, he declared a mission to decolonize Burkina Faso, targeting French influence specifically. In February 2023, he expelled French troops, ending a decades-long military presence justified by anti-terrorism operations like Operation Barkhane. He terminated exploitative mining contracts with French companies like Orano, nationalizing 2 major gold mines in 2023 and establishing Burkina Faso's first gold refinery, which processed 93 kilograms of gold from 142 tons of ore by December 2024. This shift increased gold export revenues from $200 million in 2022 to $3.6 billion in 2024, per a June 2, 2025, report by African Stream, boosting GDP from $18.8 billion to $22.1 billion. Traoré also banned unrefined gold exports, ensuring local processing to maximize value retention. Beyond economics, Traoré's reforms emphasize self-reliance. He increased civil servant salaries by 50%, distributed 5,000 tons of subsidized grain to farmers, and mandated that military uniforms be produced locally, creating 2,000 jobs in the textile sector. His refusal to accept a presidential salary, donating it to education initiatives, and his preference for military fatigues over suits project humility and solidarity with ordinary Burkinabe. In 2024, he launched the Burkina First campaign, promoting local agricultural products like millet and shea butter to reduce reliance on imported goods, which dropped from 65% to 48% of consumption by mid-2025. Per Burkina Faso's Ministry of Economy, Traoré's foreign policy has pivoted eastward, strengthening ties with Russia, China, and Turkey. The Russian embassy reopened in Ouagadougou in 2023 after a 31-year closure, and Russian military advisors, including Wagner Group mercenaries, have supported Burkina Faso's fight against jihadists. A May 15, 2025, post on X by its Sahel analyst noted that Russia provided 50 military vehicles and drones, enhancing the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland (VDP) militia. Traoré's attendance at the 2024 Russia-Africa Summit, where he secured $300 million in agricultural equipment, further solidified this partnership. However, Traoré's tenure faces significant challenges. The jihadist insurgency, linked to groups like JNIM and ISGS, has worsened, with 2.3 million people displaced and 40% of Burkina Faso's territory outside government control as of June 2025, per UNHCR data. His government's crackdown on dissent, arresting journalists like Adama Bayala and forcibly conscripting critics into the VDP, has drawn condemnation from Amnesty International. The postponement of elections from July 2024 to 2029 has raised fears of authoritarianism, with critics arguing that Traoré's anti-Western rhetoric masks governance failures. Despite surviving 18 assassination attempts, including a high-profile coup plot on April 21, 2025, allegedly backed by Ivory Coast and Western intelligence, his resilience has only amplified his mythic status, particularly among Africa's youth, who see him as a modern Sankara. Growing anti-Western sentiment in Africa. Anti-Western sentiment in Africa has reached a boiling point, driven by historical grievances, economic exploitation, and recent geopolitical tensions. The colonial era left a legacy of resource plundering and arbitrary borders, but contemporary frustrations stem from neo-colonial mechanisms like the CFA franc, used by 14 African countries, 7 in West Africa. Pegged to the euro and guaranteed by France, the CFA requires member states to deposit 50% of their foreign reserves in the French treasury, a system critics argue prioritizes French economic interests. A 2024 study by the African Development Bank estimated that CFA countries lose $500 million annually in potential investment due to this arrangement. France's military presence, through operations like Barkhane, has been a lightning rod for criticism. Despite deploying 5,000 troops across the Sahel, France failed to curb jihadist violence, leading many to view its presence as a pretext for securing access to resources like Niger's uranium and Mali's gold. The expulsion of French forces from Mali, 2022, Burkina Faso, 2023, and Niger, 2023, reflects a broader rejection of Western military dominance. The U.S., too, has faced backlash, with Niger terminating a military agreement in 2024 after U.S. AFRICOM Commander General Michael Langley accused Traoré of misusing gold reserves, a claim that sparked outrage across the Sahel, as noted in a May 3, 2025, Press TV article. This sentiment is amplified by the perceived failure of Western-backed democratic systems. The 2024 Afrobarometer survey across 39 African countries found that only 45% of respondents supported democracy, down from 63% in 2014, with youth citing unemployment, 28% in West Africa, and corruption as key grievances. Leaders like Traoré, Mali's Assimi Goïta, and Niger's Abdourahmane Tiani have capitalized on this disillusionment, framing Western institutions like the IMF and World Bank as tools of subjugation. For instance, IMF loans to Burkina Faso in the 2000s mandated privatization of state assets, leading to a 15% reduction in public sector jobs, per a 2023 UN report, fueling resentment. Social media has supercharged this movement. Platforms like TikTok and X have turned Traoré into a Pan-African icon, with hashtags like #HandOffTraoré trending after the April 2025 coup attempt. A post by @General_Sumto on April 21, 2025, declared, "The West wants Burkina's gold, but Traoré is our shield." Videos on TikTok depict Traoré as a new Sankara, with AI-generated imagery showing him leading armies against Western powers. This digital activism has spread anti-Western narratives to countries like Ghana, Nigeria, and even the African diaspora in Europe and the Americas, creating a transnational movement for sovereignty. The latest on Ghana's civil demonstrations. Ghana's civil demonstrations in 2025 have been a focal point of regional activism, blending domestic grievances with solidarity for Traoré and the AES. The most significant protest occurred on April 30, 2025, in Accra, where over 10,000 people marched under the banner, "Hands off the AES," following the foiled coup attempt against Traoré. Organized by the Socialist Movement of Ghana, SMG, and other Pan-Africanist groups, the march condemned Western interference, with SMG's leader, Kairatwai Apoku, accusing the US and France of orchestrating the coup to maintain control over African resources. A May 1, 2025, post by @African_stream highlighted the march's scale, noting participation from Burkinabe nationals, students, and trade unions. These protests are rooted in Ghana's own economic and political challenges. Despite its reputation as a democratic success story, Ghana faces 13% inflation, 25% youth unemployment, and a $3 billion IMF bailout in 2023 that imposed austerity measures, per World Bank data. The SMG and other groups have drawn parallels between Ghana's struggles and Traoré's critique of Western financial control, with protesters chanting, "No more IMF, no more CFA." During a May 25, 2025, Rally for Africa Liberation Day, as reported by @Eddie_WRT on X. The presence of Burkinabe flags and Traoré images underscored the regional dimension of the protests. Ghanaian youth, inspired by Traoré reforms, have also targeted their government's perceived alignment with Western interests. A January 2025 incident at President John Mahama's inauguration, where Traoré received louder applause than Mahama, highlighted his popularity. Protesters have warned Mahama against supporting ECOWAS sanctions on AES countries, with a General Administrasanto posting on May 1, 2025, "Ghana must not be a pawn in the West's war on Traoré." The demonstrations have remained largely peaceful, but tensions with police, who used tear gas during a June 2, 2025, protest in Tamale, suggest growing militancy. The protests also reflect a broader Pan-Africanist awakening. Ghana, as the historical seat of Kwame Nkrumah's vision for African unity, has seen renewed interest in his ideas, with groups like the All-African People's Revolutionary Party joining the marches. The SMG's May 2025 statement linked Traoré's struggle to historical resistance against imperialism, citing the assassinations of Lumumba and Sankara. This narrative has mobilized diverse groups, including market women, students, and diaspora activists, creating a vibrant coalition that amplifies the AES's influence. The spread of the AES Alliance movement. The Alliance of Sahel States, AES, formed in September 2023 by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, is a radical experiment in regional sovereignty. Born out of frustration with ECOWAS's perceived Western bias and the G5 Sahel's ineffectiveness against jihadist insurgencies, the AES seeks to redefine West African cooperation. The three countries, all led by military juntas following coups, Mali 2020 to 2021, Burkina Faso 2022, Niger 2023, withdrew from ECOWAS in January 2024, citing its failure to address regional security and its imposition of sanctions that crippled their economies. The AES was formalized as a confederation in July 2024, with a charter outlining shared defense, economic integration, and cultural unity. The AES's initiatives are ambitious. It introduced a 0.5% tariff on imported goods to fund a stabilization fund, projected to raise $1 billion annually by 2026, per June 2025 AES report. The alliance plans a regional bank, a common market, and a unified currency to replace the CFA franc, with pilot programs for biometric AES passports launched in Mali in April 2025. Joint military operations, supported by Russian equipment, have reclaimed 15% of contested territory in Burkina Faso and Mali, though jihadist attacks persist. The AES's July 2024 summit in Niamey, attended by Traoré, Goïta, and Kiani, outlined plans for a solar energy grid and a regional railway, signaling long-term integration goals. The movement's spread is evident in its influence beyond the Sahel. Ghana's partial nationalization of gold mines in May 2025, as noted by @Yakubu Haladu on X, mirrors AES policy. Senegal and Guinea have expressed interest in AES principles, with Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye meeting Traoré in June 2025 to discuss resource sovereignty. However, the AES faces challenges. Its reliance on Russian support risks new dependencies, with Wagner's human rights abuses in Mali drawing UN criticism in 2024. ECOWAS's fragmentation, with trade disruptions costing Nigeria $2 billion in 2024, per a West African Trade Association report, highlights the economic risks of isolation. The postponement of elections in AES countries, Burkina Faso to 2029, Mali to 2026, raises concerns about democratic backsliding. The AES's appeal lies in its defiance of Western hegemony. Traoré's speech at the 2024 summit, calling for true independence, not the pretense of 1960, has inspired leaders like Zimbabwe's Emerson Mnangagwa, who announced lithium nationalization plans in May 2025. The alliance's focus on youth, with 60% of its population under 25, has fueled its grassroots momentum, amplified by social media campaigns like #AESRising, which garnered 10 million views on TikTok by June 2025. Calls for economic independence and resource control. The push for economic independence and resource control is a cornerstone of Traoré's vision and the AES's agenda. Africa holds 30% of the world's mineral reserves, including 60% of global cobalt and 90% of platinum, yet benefits minimally due to foreign-dominated extractive industries. In Burkina Faso, Traoré's nationalization of gold mines and the 2023 ban on unrefined exports have redirected profits to state coffers, with gold revenue rising from 12% to 35% of GDP by 2025, per Burkina Faso's finance ministry. His policies mandate that foreign firms cede 15% equity to a state-owned mining company and train local workers, addressing the skills gap that has historically justified foreign control. Mali and Niger have followed suit. Mali renegotiated contracts with Australian firm Resolute Mining in 2024, increasing state revenue by 20%. Niger, home to 7% of global uranium, expelled French company Orano in 2023 and partnered with China for a $500 million uranium processing plant, set to open in 2026. Beyond the AES, Malawi suspended tantalum exports in February 2025 to prioritize local processing, while Zimbabwe's lithium nationalization aims to capture 40% of the global electric vehicle battery market by 2030, per a June 2025 Mining Africa report. These efforts challenge the structural inequalities of global trade. The IMF and World Bank's structural adjustment programs, which mandated privatization and austerity in the 1980s, 2000s, reduced Africa's GDP per capita growth by 1.2% annually, per a 2023 UNCTAD study. Traoré's rejection of IMF loans, announced in May 2025, reflects a broader push to escape this cycle, with Burkina Faso leveraging its 400 tons of annual gold production to fund development. The AES's proposed currency and regional bank aim to bypass Western financial systems, though experts warn that establishing a stable currency could take a decade. Challenges abound. The lack of technical expertise, as highlighted in a February 23, 2025, Malawi Ace article, hampers local processing. Corruption risks persist, with Niger's 2024 uranium deal criticized for opacity. Partnerships with Russia and China, while offering immediate support, raise concerns about new forms of dependency, as China's loans often come with high interest rates. Despite these hurdles, the narrative of resource control has galvanized public support, with Traoré's policies seen as a model for reclaiming African wealth. What made this march so powerful? The Solidarity Marches on April 30, 2025, in Burkina Faso, Ghana, Liberia, and other African cities were a watershed moment, reflecting the convergence of historical grievances, contemporary frustrations, and a unified vision for African sovereignty. Several factors made these marches exceptionally powerful. Response to a clear catalyst, the foiled coup attempt against Traoré on April 21, 2025, allegedly backed by Ivory Coast, France, and the US, served as a rallying cry. The Socialist Movement of Ghana's statement, published in People's Dispatch, framed the coup as part of a Western pattern of destabilizing independent leaders, citing Lumumba, 1961, Nkrumah, 1966, and Sankara, 1987. This historical resonance mobilized thousands, with 15,000 protesters in Ouagadougou alone, per a May 1, 2025, BBC News Pigeon report, chanting "Hands off the AES," and burning effigies of Western leaders. Digital amplification and cultural symbolism. Social media transformed the marches into a global phenomenon. TikTok videos, like one by at Pan-African Vibe with 2 million views, depicted Traoré as a divine warrior, blending AI-generated imagery with Afrobeat anthems. X-posts, such as at African Hub Memphis on June 2, 2025, celebrated Burkina Faso's economic gains, framing Traoré as a new Sankara. This digital cultural fusion created a mythology around Traoré, making the marches a celebration of African pride and resistance. The hashtag #HandsOffTraoré trended with 8 million engagements, per X Analytics. Transnational solidarity. The marches united diverse groups across borders. In Ghana, Burkinabe nationals joined local students and workers, while Liberian protesters carried AES flags, as noted by at Africa Unite on May 2, 2025. The diaspora amplified the movement, with rallies in London and New York organized by groups like the Pan-African Diaspora Network. Statements from leaders like South Africa's Julius Malema, who called Traoré Africa's Che Guevara on May 25, 2025, and Zimbabwe's Linda Masarira, who praised the AES's resource nationalization, underscored the movement's continental reach, youth-driven frustration. Africa's youth, 60% of the continent's 1.4 billion people, drove the march's energy. The 2024 Afrobarometer survey revealed that 70% of Africans aged 18 to 35 feel their governments prioritize foreign interests over citizens. Traoré's reforms, gold nationalization, local production, and anti-Western rhetoric offered a tangible alternative, resonating with protesters facing unemployment and austerity. In Ghana, chants of Traoré for Africa during the April 30th march reflected this generational shift, with youth rejecting leaders like Muhammad, seen as complicit in Western agendas. Geopolitical symbolism. The marches symbolized a broader realignment. The waving of Russian and AES flags alongside Burkinabe 1 signaled a rejection of Western dominance and an embrace of new partnerships. Traoré's survival of the coup attempt, coupled with his January 2025 appearance at Ghana's inauguration, where he outshone regional leaders, reinforced his status as a continental icon. The march's anti-ECOWAS stance, with protesters burning its flag in Niamey, highlighted a demand for African-led institutions. Historical and emotional resonance. The marches tapped into a deep well of historical pain, colonial exploitation, assassinations of revolutionary leaders, and ongoing economic marginalization. The SNG's invocation of Nkrumah's vision for a united Africa, combined with Traoré's Sankara-esque reforms, created an emotional narrative of redemption. Protesters in Liberia, as reported by Brazil de Fato on May 4, 2025, described the marches as a second independence, a sentiment echoed in Ouagadougou's chants of Africa for Africans. In conclusion, the rise of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the AES movement, and the broader push for economic independence have ignited a transformative wave across Africa. The April 30, 2025 marches were powerful because they channeled historical grievances, youth frustration, and a digital cultural revolution into a unified demand for sovereignty. While challenges like insecurity, governance concerns, and new dependencies loom, the movement's momentum, fueled by Traoré's defiance and the AES's vision, signals a pivotal moment in Africa's quest for self-determination. The marches were not just protests, but a declaration of a new African identity, rooted in pride, resistance, and hope for a future free from external control.